Bitcoin detractors love to harp on about how bad its energy consumption is without actually really doing any further research into the subject, and then they come out with scaremongering headlines such as Bitcoin's energy use will burst its bubble, or Bitcoin uses more energy than Argentina. And the thing is, there's so much more to it than this, so if you stick around, I'll explain why. Hey guys, I'm Spragg, and just to put it bluntly, Bitcoin uses a ton of energy. In this video, I'm going to be making some comparisons, and I just want to put it out there to begin with that I don't think that by saying this is worse than this, it necessarily makes one good. So first, I'm going to outline just how much energy Bitcoin actually uses. There's actually no recent figure for how much energy usage Bitcoin is using. It's somewhere between 70 and 120 terawatt hours per year, which does actually mean that it is using, if it's on that higher end of that scale, more energy than Argentina, the UAE, and the Netherlands. If you look at the footprint of just the Bitcoin miners, you will see that it's actually larger than that of every gamer on the planet, whether that's PC or console. The thing is that Bitcoin actually does have to be this intensive for proof of work to work. For the miners to actually validate the blocks and to create the race condition that allows for the minting and forging of new blocks, you need it to be difficult and you need it to require power. Going back as far as 2008, this is actually one thing that Satoshi Nakamoto had accounted for. The idea was that the creation of Bitcoins would cost power. There's actually quite a few common misconceptions when it comes to Bitcoin's power consumption, so if you want to see me explain some of those, click up here. So now that we've established that Bitcoin does have an incredibly high power consumption, we also need to address the fact that this will go down over time. As ASIC miners become more efficient and use less power, the total power required to mine Bitcoin will actually decrease. So before we mine any deeper into this topic and get into why the power consumption by Bitcoin isn't actually that bad in the grand scheme of things, hit the subscribe button down below if you're enjoying the content. So the first argument to be made is that Bitcoin actually uses a lot of renewable energy. You will see it in the news constantly that Bitcoin doesn't use renewable energy and that because most of the miners are in China, it's using fossil fuels, but this just isn't true. The fact of the matter is that Bitcoin miners will go wherever the power is cheapest. And that is actually leading to a large concentration of miners working out of Sichuan, China. And the thing is that in Sichuan, they actually have 95% of their power comes from renewable energy sources, which means that most of the miners in that region are actually using 95% renewable power sources. So obviously not every miner is in this region, so we have to look at the bigger picture as a whole. Well, a report by CoinShares found that the energy that miners were using was actually on average 74% renewable. Then you got the fact that Tesla recently purchased $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin. Would a company whose entire ethos is about being environmentally friendly have done that if it was really as bad as these papers portray it as? So now that we've established that Bitcoin actually uses a far higher percentage of renewable energy sources than the financial institutions or gold do, we can now move on to the second argument. So let's compare the power consumption of Bitcoin to that of financial institutions and the production of gold. Well, this is actually kind of a hard one to do because while it's very easy to calculate the total usage of Bitcoin miners because we know how many miners there are and we know how much energy they are consuming. So it's actually really hard to figure out just how much energy, say, a financial institution is using because there is no transparency there at all, which is actually one of the problems with financial institutions. But anyway, what we can do is we can add up the estimated power consumption of ATMs, data centers, branches, all of these sorts of things, and we can figure out roughly how much financial institutions are using. So if we add it all up, we get 110 terawatt hours per year. Now, this puts it pretty much bang in the middle of where the two Bitcoin estimates are of 70 to 120. The big difference with this is that for a bank or a financial institution to grow, they need to build more branches, they need to build bigger data centers, and they need to consume more power. Bitcoin, on the other hand, will actually decrease in the amount of power that it's going to use over time. And using things like wallets don't actually take any more electricity because we're already walking around with phones in our pockets. So now let's move on to gold. Well, gold actually takes 150 terawatt hours per year just to get it out the ground and put it through production. This is an insane amount of power. So if we add the amount that gold takes and the amount that banking institutions take together, we end up with 260 terawatt hours per year. Now, given that Bitcoin is aiming to make both these systems redundant, let's say in a completely hypothetical world, both of these were just to disappear, it would actually mean that the net power used would only be 48% of what the two of those are currently using. So, now the meat and potatoes. Why does this even keep coming up? Well, you see, the problem is that Bitcoin is transparent. It's transparent by nature. And this means that people can look at these big scary numbers and go, oh, that's really bad. That's awful. We need to do something about this. They don't want to do this to try and help Bitcoin. They don't want to do it to try and suggest ways that it could be improved. They want to do it to get rid of Bitcoin. The problem is that for years they were using the Bitcoin has no value excuse to try and scare people into selling and getting rid of Bitcoin. Because financial institutions and the gold industry cannot make money in the same way that they do now if Bitcoin exists. Why would you go through the hassle of buying and transporting gold when you could just go to an exchange online, buy a Bitcoin, stick it on a wallet, and now you've got exactly the same thing? So the thing is that these institutions don't actually want Bitcoin to exist. So now that the store of value argument doesn't work because the price just keeps going up and more people join the scene, and clearly that's not a tactic that works for them, they're instead going to harp on about how much energy it uses and why, when everything is working towards an environmentally friendly future, why this is such a terrible thing that we are now putting money into a system that uses so much power. So the thing is, this actually has nothing to do with how much energy Bitcoin is using. As we as humans evolve, we are going to consume more power. What we can do is we can try and make sure that more of that energy is coming from renewable sources, but to say that we cannot use any more power than we're using right now is just a stupid argument. So realistically, it's not about the power that's being used. It's about the detractors wanting Bitcoin to fail. It's about the media who have been harping on for years about how Bitcoin will never go anywhere and it will die off and it will be worth zero, now having to come to terms with the fact that all of those things they said are wrong, and they're starting to look pretty dumb in the eyes of everyone who's backed the scene for so many years, when big players who previously said, oh, it's never going to go anywhere, are now turning around and putting billions into it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave it a like down below. If you disagree with anything that I said, leave me a comment. And if you enjoy the content, please do consider subscribing because it really means a lot to me. Thanks. Bye.